Good evening, Tipsiers. Ranger Dave coming at you from almost 7,000 feet of elevation here outside of Colorado Springs, Colorado. We get to talk about a trail tonight that I have a real passion for, the Colorado Trail. We're going to give you three must have tips if you're going to tackle either all or part of the trail, as well as share a little footage from some of my previous hikes. So sit back, relax. I hope you're popping open a cold one, and let's get to work. So, a quick reminder tonight, hit that like and subscribe button if you love hiking, or if you just simply love getting, a little tipsy while on the trail. Also, check out the description tonight. We're going to have some great information, links to some of the resources that I mentioned, as well as a link to a prior video where I'm actually on the Colorado Trail. So let's talk a little bit about the Colorado Trail. So after my last video where I was actually out on segment 4 of the Colorado Trail, I decided to put together a video detailing out what the trail actually is, putting together some resources that I found valuable on my hikes that other hikers and campers should find valuable as well, and also just share 3 big tips I have for anyone who's going to tackle the trail. I've spent over 22 nights camping on the trail. I've done several day hikes. And let me tell you, I have learned a lot, not just about hiking and camping, but specifically how to tackle a high altitude trail like the Colorado Trail. So the Colorado Trail is one of America's premier long distance hiking trails. It stretches from Denver, Colorado, all the way to Durango, Colorado. It's 485 miles long, and it's broken into 28 main or original segments, along with 5 alternative segments in the middle of the trail. So at one part, you have to decide, do you want to go on the alternative segments, which is known as Collegiate West, or do you want to go on Collegiate East, which are the 5 original segments in that area? Collegiate meaning the Collegiate Peaks, which are a series of 14,000 foot mountains in the area. Absolutely gorgeous. They're going to be featured on an upcoming video. The nice thing about it being broken up into segments is that those segments, more times than not, end and begin at a trailhead and or a parking lot. That makes it very easy for a hiker to say, hey, instead of taking on all 485 miles at one time, I'm going to take it on one segment at a time, or take it on a few segments at a time. That is what our team has been doing over the past few years, and that's our plan for the foreseeable future. The trail also passes by several beautiful mountain towns, which make resupply pretty easy. A little preparedness and a little preparation go a long way, but transportation from the trail or the trailhead to town and back is fairly straightforward. Also, the trail passes by several 14ers. 14ers are 14,000 foot mountains here in Colorado, and they're very popular to hike. So you can actually be out on the trail and bag some of those 14ers if that's your thing. Overall, the Colorado Trail offers a beautiful challenge to any hiker. Doesn't matter if you're just starting out or if you're an avid long-distance hiker, this is a great trail to tackle. Let's now talk about my 3 must-have tips for anyone who's going to tackle the Colorado Trail. The first of which is do research ahead of time. Utilize some different resources to get a feel for what you're getting into with each segment. Also get some recent hiker feedback on segments of the trail. Also current trail conditions. That just makes for a much more enjoyable experience when you're out there in nature. The first resource I want to introduce you to is this little guy right here. This is the Colorado Trail Foundation's data book. This is a wealth of knowledge and some of the best money you can spend if you're going to be anywhere near the Colorado Trail. So it goes over things like elevation gain and loss within each segment, terrain in each segment, water sources within each segment, but also campgrounds. That is key information to know, even if you're not going to be hiking much of the trail. If you just enjoy camping, instead of being surrounded by 100 of your best friends at a campground that you paid for, you can strap on a backpack, pop open this little guy, and find campsites that you might be the only one camping at. And many of them are beautiful. They're in meadows, they're near streams, they're on ridge lines. This is a must-have if you're going to be anywhere near the trail. The second resource I want to introduce you to is the Colorado Trail Foundation's website. It has different information than the data book, but still a wealth of knowledge for anyone who's going to be out on the trail. As an example, there's a blog on the website that's updated weekly or every other week talking about current trail conditions, what to expect. Great example this last week, there's actually a detour at the beginning of segment 8. If you didn't read the blog and you're out hiking, you might get there and be a little lost and not know what's going on. There's also a map that goes over current snowpack. That's really important in early season hikes. We used that on our segment 4 hike to get a feel for exactly what equipment we needed. Was the hike even doable? I'd encourage you to check that out if you're going to be an early season hiker. The third resource I want to introduce you to is what's called Gut Hooks, or now Far Out. That is current hiker feedback and current trail conditions. So if you want to check and see how a certain trail's water sources are looking, that's a great place to do it, because hikers can go in and actually put in that feedback and say, hey, everything's great, or hey, actually the creeks within this segment weren't really running. Great resource to look at. The final resource I want to introduce you to is actually a YouTube channel that I found. It's called Outside Comfort Zone, featuring Snackbox. Love your videos, man. Wealth of knowledge. It would have saved me a lot of pain if I would have seen those when I first started hiking the Colorado Trail segment by segment. And I encourage you all, check out those videos. He actually breaks it out segment by segment, has some different tips. And it's really easy to navigate if you're going to be a segment hiker instead of taking it all on at once, but it's still useful for that as well. So must-have tip number 2 is start with the segments closest to Denver if you're not an experienced hiker and you're going to take this on segment by segment. Few reasons why I would suggest that. The first of which, they're easy to get to if you're coming from Denver or Colorado Springs, especially if you're an out-of-stater flying in. It just makes it a little easier. The second of which is those are lower elevation hikes. So if you're not used to hiking at altitude, it just makes it a little easier to catch your breath. The third, and probably the most important, especially if you're not an experienced hiker, is it's really easy to bail out of the trail if you're not having a great time, or you learn, hey, I need to have a different approach. Not only are those segments closer to Denver, so they have a lot more traffic within them, so it's easier to get a hitch into town. There are many different little mountain towns along the way, so pretty easy to get out of there, get a hitch, get back into town, and get some supplies. Finally, those are just in general easier segments. So it's a good test to see, hey, is this something you enjoy? Are you ready to take on bigger chunks of the trail? And just overall, I think it'll give you a better experience if you start closer to Denver. So the third and final must-have tip for taking on the Colorado Trail is get in hiking shape. Not only will you feel much better after you've hiked dozens of miles, but when you hike up that ridgeline and you're trying to take a selfie with the mountains in the background, you're not going to want to sound like a diesel engine because you're out of shape. Go on some hikes wherever you're from. Get a weighted vest off of Amazon. That's a really easy way to get in some decent hiking shape. I have one and I've really enjoyed using it. Also, if you go to the gym, work out your shoulders and work out your legs. The Stairmaster and squats are your friends. But overall, get in good shape. Kind of test yourself before you head out on a long distance trail like the Colorado Trail. So not only do you feel better physically, but you feel better mentally. You know you prepared for it. These tips are really important based on personal experience and mistakes that I've made. So early on when I was hiking the Colorado Trail, I went out on segment 1 with Pile Driver. He's a hiking buddy of mine. You'll see him in some future videos. And we broke multiple rules. We didn't do enough research ahead of time, especially on water sources. We were not in hiking shape. We just loved being outdoors and it sounded like a great challenge. We had a great beginning to the hike and then we got to a water source and it was empty. We should have known that ahead of time. We weren't in great shape. We had to hike 8 miles to the nearest river to fill up and we got dehydrated. Everything ended up fine. Thank goodness we followed rule number 2. We were close to Denver and could bail out. But let me tell you, when you get to the point you would drag your junk through a mile of broken glass just to get a 20-ounce Powerade, that's not fun for anyone. Learn from our mistakes, embrace these tips, and you're going to have a great time on the Colorado Trail. Thank you for joining us for our 3 must-have tips for anyone getting out on the Colorado Trail. We're actually going back out next week. Cannot wait for those hikes. We're going to have some great footage for you and some great tastings along the way. I hope you're able to get out on the trail, pop open a cold one, and live life long, loose, and full of juice. Take care.